Good evening everyone. Today I'm bringing you a Tectonic Slam Chieftain for 3.14 Ultimatum League. This build was originally made by a user by the name of JennoJoyce, and I'll link their forum post and guide in the description below so that you can check it out in all its glory. Now, this build has two versions to it. There's a non-crit version and a crit version. The non-crit version is our budget option, and we can do all of this for less than 2 exalts. And that's what I'll be showcasing today. The critical option is much more expensive, but can dish out several times more damage. The main feature of this build is its ability to one-shot anything and everything. Here's a quick compilation of what that means. So in order for us to one-shot bosses, we have a very specific combo and order of skills that we need to do in order to achieve maximum firepower. Our first step is to get Seismic Cry down to its final charge, giving us the maximum area and the maximum damage. Step number 2 is to use Vile Ancestral Warchief. So we throw that down, that gives us a more multiplier. Our third step is to use Intimidating Cry. That straight up doubles our damage and intimidates the boss, giving us even more damage. The fourth step is to cast Phase Run. This gives us a very short duration phase run, but it gives us a decent damage boost on our next melee attack. And the final part of the puzzle is Namahu's Flames Advance. When that is up, we gain 100% of our physical damage as extra fire damage. With all of this combined, we hit like absolute monster trucks. The footage in the background is from a tier 10 Coves map, just Alkengode. Now to evaluate this build, we're going to be using 4 categories. We're going to use damage, we're going to use speed, survivability, and general playstyle. The first category is damage. Now you saw from that short boss montage that we certainly have the damage. You can see from the footage in the background, everything is dying in one Tectonic Slam, no matter what level our seismic charge is on. The only exceptions so far that I have found to this are the Ultimatum rares. Some of them survive one slam, but they do not survive another. So our damage is certainly an A+. The second category is speed. As you can see from the footage in the background, speed is not our strongest point. In fact, we have rather average speed. We are burdened by the fact that we are slams. We have slow attack speed, but we hit hard. We are also burdened by Fist of War. A lot of our damage comes when Fist of War is up, so we time our attacks between packs to time with Fist of War. Fortunately, at the speed this build currently plays at, your Fist of War is up by the time you reach the next pack. There's not a lot of waiting around between slams. As soon as it's ready, you slam. While the build doesn't look as fast, when you're playing it, it feels very smooth because you're slamming from pack to pack on cooldown of your Fist of War, so it feels quite nice. But overall, I'd give it a C+ in terms of speed. Category 3 is survivability. In terms of characters I've played so far in Path of Exile, this definitely ranks as one of the tankier characters I've ever played. We are very hard to kill, and I've had no issue staying alive, except in some very niche cases where there's 2 to 3 damage mods on a map and critical strikes. And it's always during a ultimatum on top of that. Those are the only times I've ever had issues trying to stay alive, and even then, the times I do die is just because I stood still too long. If I'd kept moving, it would have been fine. Our first layer of defense is our endurance charges. As Chieftain, we get 7 endurance charges on this build. That gives us a lot of health generation, that gives us a lot of physical damage reduction. Our second layer of defense comes in our armor rating. We currently sit at just under 6,500 armor. Now at base that gives us an estimated 38% physical damage reduction sitting in hideout. With our 7 endurance charges, that pushes it up to 62%. We also have a Lion's Roar Granite Flask. That gives us 3,000 to our armor. We also have increased armor during flask effect on one of our other flasks. Doesn't matter which flasks, as long as you have it. With those combined, while our flasks are active, which should be pretty much all the time except during certain boss encounters, we get up to 85% estimated physical damage reduction. If you had a better rolled increased armor during flask effect than I do, you could easily push that higher. Our third layer of defense comes from our quartz flask, which gives us phasing. For this league in particular, phasing is an invaluable part of our defensive strategy, as when there's mobs everywhere in ultimatums, we can just run right through them as if they don't exist. Now if you have an alternative source of phasing, you can sub out a quartz flask for a basalt flask, really pushing our physical damage reduction even higher. As if we have phasing, we don't need the quartz flask. Our fourth layer of defense is in terms of elemental damage from our wise oak. Because we have perfectly balanced resistance, we get 10% reduced damage of all 3 elemental resistance types. It's not a lot, but it's very helpful nonetheless. Our fifth layer of defense comes from our cast when damage taken molten shell setup. We have a level 15 cast when damage taken and a level 18 molten shell. We use level 15 cast when damage taken because we only want it when we're starting to take those big bursts of damage, and I feel like this is a decent level for that to occur. If we're only taking hits of 100 every now and then, we don't want it going off all the time, because then it'll be on cooldown when we get a real burst of damage. So having a higher cast when damage taken allows us to reserve it for those times, more often than not. With all those layers in mind, this is one of the tankier builds I've played. So I'm going to give this a solid A in terms of defensive ability and staying alive. And on to the last category, playstyle. This is a slamming warcrying build, which means we need to time our warcries and keep them up constantly in order to achieve our damage. If we forget, our damage drops like a brick. Without your warcries up, you don't do anywhere near as much damage as you do when they're up. When we go to boss, we need to have a very specific combo, and we need to time it to all coincide within a 4-second window of our ascendancy ability. It's a very active playstyle. It's certainly not a one-button build. It's certainly not a walking simulator build. It's very active, and you do need to be turned on and keeping track of multiple things. Some people don't like that. Some people do. I haven't found it to be too bad. I find the active playstyle quite enjoyable. It keeps me turned on at all times. I'm always paying attention because I'm always needing to look at things. I'm always needing to keep an eye on several different things at once. I find it keeps me engaged. There is no grading for this one. This one's just personal preference. So to summarize, we have an A+ for damage, we have a C+ for speed, and we have a solid A for survivability, with a very engaging and active playstyle. This has been a very fun build for me to play, and an extremely good league starter. This will be at the top of my list for future leagues, as it's such a good and cheap league starter with potential to scale into crit and just go absolutely ham on the endgame. Once again, props to JennoJoyce, the original creator of this build. I'll be linking their build guide in the description below. Hopefully I've convinced some of you that this build is worth playing and will be a lot of fun, so please do check it out.